So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers from around the globe, and welcome to another series of intimate conversations with your host, Mandy Horton. And if you feel compelled to press the subscribe button to my YouTube channel, that would be amazing. So, today's guest, we're going to be talking with Hirini Reedy. And so, welcome, Hirini.
Kia ora, welcome to you and all those who have gathered here in this time. Blessings, blessings, blessings.
Beautiful. And Hirini's been on quite a journey, and this is what we're going to be discussing today in this conversation is Hirini's journey from, he's walked New Zealand twice. So the land of New Zealand, he's walked from the tip to the bottom of both islands, and we're going to be discussing a little bit about that and more. So just to refresh or to bring you into the awareness of what Hirini or who Hirini is and what he's been up to, I'll just give the short little bio here. But Hirini holds a bachelor in civil engineering and masters of philosophy in Maori, and now writing a Maori PhD thesis on spiritual warrior philosophy for global changes. Maori military historian who has visited major battle sites of the New Zealand Wars, 1845 to 1881, invited to Gandhi International Peace Course in Jalgaon, is it, in India, 2020, and twice walked the length of New Zealand in 2017, North to South Island, and 2022 south to north for spiritual reasons, which we'll get into, no doubt. And he undertakes Maori healer peace missions, both locally and overseas. So, Hirini, you've got lots of background here. You know, there's a screed of things here that you've been done, you know, and your qualifications and different things. So, oh my goodness me, where do we start? Tell us a bit about your childhood, maybe. Like, were you a consciously aware kid, do you think?
Kia ora. Before we initiate my own story, let us invoke the blessings so that there is intelligence shared not just through the oratory of mankind. And so with that, that is the kōmako, the song of the bellbird, which reminds me of my youth when I grew up at the bottom of Mountain Hikurangi on the eastern coast of the North Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand, which, according to the timeline of modern man, has the sunlight touch its peaks first. The bellbird heralds the opening of the day. And so we journey through this opening of this day and this life of yours right now, people who are gathered. And also we look at the mystery of the night, the setting of the sun, which is again another bird for here. We call it the ruru or the koko. The one who sees the mystery of the night. And so let this talk, this gathering, be part of this reawakening of both the sunbird and the night owl within our beings. And so that gives some intimation of where I've come from and where I'm also walking. So to answer the question, I grew up in a small town called Ruatoria on the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. Very rural upbringing. We had to cross rivers and so forth, and we were homeschooled right up to the age of 12. And a lot of that education was both Maori immersed, because when you're surrounded by mountains, the rivers, we call them the elemental elders. The elemental elders, the ancestors of the elements from which derives the human being, no different to all the other cultures. And so a lot of that question of being a conscious child is really just being in awareness of where you are growing up and allowing you to find those things which later on in life, when you become adult, they get concreted over, asphalted over, and they no longer has a resonance. So that's where I grew up, very in a Maori family, and part of that, our family, interesting, I have an Irish surname. Hi, top of the morning to you, the Irish. That Irish ancestor came in the mid 1800s to Aotearoa, having left the hunger of Ireland, the famine, then married in to a Maori family of very strong wahine. And our family is essentially the Ngārimu family. And part of that family is the rimu tree. I have a rimu tree here, very similar to the Kauri of the North.
Yeah.
And we were the protectors. And that's why part of my story has been part of the Maori battalion, being a veteran and looking at how we protect the elemental elders of the earth and this transition time. And that's why I did the walk, because we must walk out, in my opinion, if I can say this in this opening now, Burnley, we must move from the military force into a more spiritual warrior benevolence that can hold the life force of the planet.
Yes.
That's just a little bit of my upbringing, and we can explain a bit more with specificity as we approach and walk this interview.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you for that. And, you know, when I hear you speak in that way, bringing in bird and the elements and the tree, it's seeing that we're all connected. Like there is always connection. We've never, ever been separate to or, you know, lost in any way, really. We've always been connected to this, to the Wairua, to the spirit of everything, and this bringing together the elements. It's a beautiful way to see the world, really, and to look at life every day and be reminded of that connection and that closeness, eh? It's beautiful.
Yeah, just to continue that, particularly because we were encouraged in our family to seek the education of the modern system, and I'll say that.
Yeah.
And we had a saying from a grand elder who said, "E tipu irea," which means grow little fern frond. Ki ngā rako o tō ao, for the days and times of your existence.
Mm.
And it was mentoring to the young people who were being alluded to as the new fronds, the new ferns coming through. Ko tō ringa ki ngā rako a te Pākehā, hei oronga mō tō tinana. And what it means is that let your hand grasp the knowledge of the Pākehā, the knowledge, the degrees, the commercial wonders of business, and all those beautiful things of the imperialism legacy for your material well-being, said the elder. Ko tō ngākau ki ngā taonga o tipono Māori hei tikitiki mō tō māhuna. The treasures and the blessings that you hold in your heart become a plume, a feather for your hat or for that which adorns your head. So reminding us that we go back into those ancient ancestries, those intimate feelings that dwell in all of us, so that we can use that to be the crown, to be adornment of our thinking and of our life. And then the final ones, ko tō wairua ki te atua nāna me ngā mega katoa. And within these two, let your spirit return to the great creator, beyond names, creeds, and religions, to the great creation, and allow yourself to be at home.
Mm.
There is the walking spirit, walking home. So that is a metaphor for some of the teachings why a lot of our people, we were aspired, and not just us, many others, to be able to balance both the left and the right hemispheres of intelligence, the
Yeah.
north and the southern hemispheres of history.
Beautiful. And your family are all still over in on the East Coast, Hirini? Most of them?
Yes, and we've also moved, some have moved overseas as well. My parents have passed, and so part of me is also finding peace with the memory of being, but also knowing that we as souls now need to move around in order to bring the presence of ourselves. And this
Yeah.
is why I'm sure that we're talking about, we can sometimes get locked in the family embodiment,
Mhm.
but we are now living at a time where we need to go beyond ethnicity, skin colors, and diversity to find where is the soul needed. Who is my family?
Mm.
Who are the family? There are many families now, and so we have to be able to embrace our genealogy, but also people are expanding beyond this body, and we need to look at how we actually can be part of a earth family, a
Yes.
celestial family, each person finding their own definitions of what that means.
Mm. Yeah. For sure, and it is now. We're finding, I shifted around right from when I was, 15. I started moving away from home and doing my own thing. And it's taken me, throughout the country, North Island anyway. And I've moved from place to place to place to place. And each place had a purpose for me. Each place, it was like I was divinely placed there to walk some journey that was going to enhance who I am and what I might remember about myself. So it's always been important. And I used to get a bit upset about not owning a property as such, and seeing that as being a failure in some way because, everything's about building your success and building your finances and building your security and owning, ownership. And it was never anything, that I really desired to do. And when I realized that it wasn't meant to be, because if I had have bought, then I would have stayed in that place. I would have just been stagnant in a sense, I feel, and not sold up as often as I might have if I was renting and just moving on, So it was interesting to see it as being that's my journey and it's all okay because what I've grown from that is hugely important for me. So yeah, I can see this. And Hirini, when like, how did you manage to walk the island twice? Like, actually, when I think about that, physically, you were in the military, obviously you were fit enough, because you'd need to be pretty fit and well to do that journey twice, at least, once even. But you did it twice. What was, tell me about the drive. What was that drove you, deeply?
First of all, there is the physical step and there's the spiritual footprint.
Mm.
If I could just disclose my own experience, each person is no different to the peregrino or the pilgrim walking for a spiritual reason to
Yes.
receive revelation. And I'm not a spiritual man, but I'm just, you get things revealed to you on your walk as a metaphor for the walk of life. You also leave things. The key thing is you can do this if you have a spiritual reason.
Mm.
I'll just turn this here to the flag.
Yeah.
To my rear here is a flag of 1,000 faces of the Maori battalion of my area.
Right. They
They
are
gave me the strength. I walked with them.
Mm.
And so up the top there, I'll just make it because it'll give you some perspective why I walked. Forgive me.
No, it's all good, all good.
Can you read? Up there you'll see where I've made all the battlefields, March of Remembrance, and all the places that I went through. All these
Wow.
men have passed. And for me, it wasn't about the war when I walked. And even down the bottom here, as I point, sorry, Bev, I'm getting my orientation.
Yeah,
This flag
okay.
is signed with my blood. It's not about me as an individual. So if I fall, someone else can pick it up because the blood continues to walk. And so I'll just come back down. Forgive me, those people who are very digital literate. I'm just moving stuff around as I regain my
It's
seat.
all good. All good.
And so to ask you a reason, you must have a spiritual, because the spiritual will give you strength way beyond your physical conditioning. So look at that. This was my reason. There are things that were given to me that occurred where sometimes I would walk at night and then I might have, and I mentioned to you when we first met, I fell asleep, sleepwalking, and I ended up in a cemetery.
Yeah.
And in that cemetery were mothers of some of these men whose sons never came home. Some of the things that were given to me, I'm very careful because there were things given to me that one was a German flag that was won in the middle of war, that was brought back as a receipt for the price of citizenship. We couldn't bring Hitler back, but brought a flag back as a receipt for those who had given their sons and their families to this particular war. I was also given a Dalai Lama flag, because as you know, the swastika derives called the Hakenkreuz, the hooked cross, which is what the Germans had used to bring all that energy into Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer, Sieg Heil. You can see it's a powerful aggregation of energies when you start to mobilize like that.
Yeah.
And what the Dalai Lama flag did was to distribute that energy back out into a cosmological order of which true intention and creation is able to circulate. And so I was walking with those reasons so that we bring peace on multiple fronts, using Aotearoa as a place where this can coexist again. And I was walking because that first walk from north to south represented the forgiveness of the spilling of blood by man in war, to acknowledge the birth blood that Wahine give as part of birthing of life into this life. Different to the man taking life and blood on the battlefield. And there needs to be that level of forgiveness and wisdom so that we move from the military force, the doctrine of imperialism, one for a better word, of power, to a more of a balanced way of measuring and bringing peace into discordant force. When two fists are coming, one needs to say, stop it, calm down, fist, open up, and finally the two hands come together and they start to rub and find each other's joy. When they get steady, okay, point, say, stop it, because if you continue to bomb me, I will give you 3 warnings, and then I'll have to pull your missile apart. And so that was part of my walking. And there's a whole lot of story to that, because these things, there are patterns leading up to it. So to answer your question, have a spiritual reason or something bigger than yourself to walk for. And also your walk doesn't need to be long. It doesn't have to be the whole of New Zealand. It could be a 3-day walk where you're walking with something that you wish to bring forth. You're walking for something bigger than yourself just for 3 days. I think that's what happened when the crucifix was put on. There was a 3-day sort of thing. Forgive me, I'm just jumping around to say that you don't need to do the big walk if you can bring it into a microcosm of something small but deep. Small but deep, as opposed to long and just surface.
Yeah.
That it was it for me.
Mm.
And I think I've completed my walking in this particular manner now. And just to finish this particular question, the first walk was north to south, which was the red walk, which was the war walk, the red blood of war, but also hinting towards the forgiveness, towards the red moon blood of the wahine, as she also gives blood as part of her life cycle, but also as part of her birthing.
Yeah.
The second walk was from the south to the north, which was more the feminine walk, the time of the feminine force, and symbolic of the green southern light coming back up towards the hemispheres, symbolizing the green shoot of creation coming back up from the dark undersoil of the universe, the rich alchemy, the alcheme, which I believe is the old name for the fertile soil of the Egyptian Nile basin, bringing that back up as a metaphor for the regreening and the regeneration of a new way of coexistence without needing to go back into the devising of war and those type of things, helping to curve the blade such that it can be a flower again. Forgive me for using my hands, because sometimes
No, all good.
words cannot explain what the body is able to also share.
Yeah. I talk with my hands a lot too, so don't worry about it. So I totally get the deeper reason, like it does need to be a spiritual thing for us to conquer some of the drive that we have within ourselves. There's always the bigger picture, or the bigger purpose in it. And so this would be something like we might call a vision quest, where Indian and all sorts used to get sent out, and they were sitting for nights and nights or days out in a very, secluded space, and just in that absolute silence and stillness of self. Um, and being able to listen to the inner voice. And I know I've been sent on vision quests myself and had to sit. It was only one night, but it was facing big fears for me. And the incredible stuff that came through that, and the strength that it gave me afterwards, in my resilience and myself, and my growth, and my own spiritual awareness of who I am. So I get that. I think that's an amazing thing. And yes, that sleepwalking and waking up in the cemetery where there were, those sorts of things, are just miraculous in their own way. And you had many of these types of beautiful things experiences happen to you on this trip or these trips. Would you like to share just some of those that you feel you can share?
Yes, just so that people are saying, observe and go and be, it's like being a tracker. There
Mm,
is this world of appearances, the world of appearances of surfaces. And then when you look beyond the surface, even in your daily room or in your daily life, you're going through the habitual movements of daily life. But if you stop, you may see something that, wow, there's a message being revealed here. And for a lot of people, they have to get the knock on the head or the heart or something that hurts like shit. Pardon my language, didn't mean to mention excrement. But sometimes when part of my testing, because a lot of my elders, they've passed on. So I had to revisit some of the ways of finding that way of knowledge. And one of them was to go and, like a vision quest, but to swallow a stone. You go to a particular river, dive into a pool when the moon was reflected on the surface, and dive down and pick up a stone. I did a similar thing, and that was just me making it up in my earlier days as I started getting onto the walking and a whole range of things, but it was me seeking my own way of exploring my spirituality.
yeah.
And so we have in the Maori culture and others, we would call the whakahoro kohatsu, the swallowing of the stone. And then what came through me, and there will be different traditions, but this was my experience. I then had to create a circle of 10 spaces in the bush and wait for the stone to pass through my being. So I had to wait for the stone. Now, in fact, I had 2 stones, because when I first went to dive down and swallow the stone, I picked up a stone that was too big and I choked, but it went down. Then a
Yeah.
thought came to me: be perceptive in the search of spirituality. Find a stone that is the size of your thumbnail. Be more aware. So I dived down and found a smaller stone that I was able to swallow. Then I went through and had to spend my day tracking that 10, that I came to know that space because I was there basically fasting and waiting for the stone. So I had to track my excrement. The first excrement, proud pieces of excrement, mighty turds, lined up. As I went through the first day, second day, the turds became less prominent, less powerful, more of a, okay, that's the reality of it. Also, I was
Yeah.
tracking that space and I was seeing things that I hadn't observed before. I was able to pick out little things like ants' nests, able to look
Right.
through the leaves of the branches in front of me and see what's across the other side. And I was able to track. Then what happened? The first stone came out after about 1.5 days. But then I got worried. Where's the second stone? And then I had another 1 to 2 days where I started going down, and I was thinking maybe it's stuck in my body, maybe my intestines and so forth. And to cut the long story short, I had this particular stool movement, which was very, very, wasn't even worthy of such a name. It was more of a flatulence with a little bit of out, how dare I
Yeah.
call that a real? But when I reached down into it, I found the stone. I was free. The liberation. I was free from this self-imposed 10. So I rearranged it. I mixed up all my excrement, made sure. Then I took those 2 stones back to that place where I got them from and placed them back in there. They were symbolic of the journey of my life through the inner world of existence. And like we have an entry point, we also have an exit point.
Yeah.
But we continue to exist within the great stream of creation that continues to flow. And so this is a metaphor for my journey when I did my walk. I called it, the first part, I called it the walk of Aho, walk of self, which is basically the walking breath. From my first breath to my last breath, each breath is a walk of life. This breath that I'm using right now in this moment will not come this way again. And it will reach a point where the last breath will farewell me in this body. And so that was the basis for exploring your own reasons for self-exploration. Some of them you might have to conceive your own self, and you will be looked at in a very, very psychological, deficient way. And people are going, you need to get yourself checked out.
Yep.
So have these reasons because you get the experience. You might need to do the extreme thing, but that was just one way using the stone to go through my body as a metaphor. For those who are wishing to do it, just be gentle and choose a small stone. Be conscious of what you take in.
Yeah.
That was the question. Be conscious because it can actually choke the inner self. Find that which is in alignment with your curve.
Beautiful. Yeah. And did you find, like, because you would have met people along the way all the time, but there would have been times where, and not all the time, but because there would have been times where you were a wee bit more, say, isolated, not so many people around. Did you find, like, was there any long lengths of time where you were on your own and you didn't speak to anyone else? And was there points in there where you became lonely, or you started sort of, craving for, connection? With human, I mean, because we're in nature, and that for me is sustainable for me, but for some people, hey, it'd be a bit much.
You have to find your resonance with the human being. Many types of human beings, they all have a body, a head, and that, but you got to find your energy. Some are very loud. They are like roosters. And whereas part of you wants to be like the ruru, the owl, and just listen quietly to the stillness.
Yeah.
So you must find your appropriate gathering that helps you to be in a song with them, so that you can allow your song to sing. And sometimes we need the discordant, because it allows us to actually appreciate our uniqueness. And so a lot of other little things happened, which I'll give echo. On my hat, I basically have the ruru, which is the talon of the owl, which guided me at certain times when I was unsure and I was walking, and particularly at night, I would use that owl that called to me as an indicator. And I have the talent to remind myself to look for the three synchronicities. So people who are listening, look at three synchronicities of some possibility that you're thinking about. You get a confirmation in the morning. You may hear this podcast and say, that man's speaking stuff that echoes to me. Second, and then you maybe hear your family member, you might have had a birthday and things have been revealed again. And then you go, yes, I remember. I need to remember stuff that's happened before and bring it into this new time.
Yeah.
Look for things like that. They don't need to be obvious, but when you put them into a story, a lot of the things that I had, when I looked at the relevance of them, they said a story. One was when I was walking down at night to get some water, because I could hear the water, and I saw a little snail traveling along, and I turned my light on so that I didn't fall in, and a little snail was going along the side of a bank, and it was going towards the moisture. And I said, hey, little snail, high five. You and me are walking. I got my pack. You got your pack. We're both thirsty. It was underneath a bridge on the East Coast. And what happened, a huge logging truck, because a lot of logging trucks do their at night, where they load and bring it back in. It came over the bridge. Me and the snail both sort of hid, froze, and waited for the truck to go past. When I looked to find my snail again, the vibrations of the truck had knocked it into the water, and it had got swept away. Part of me was quite upset that this innocent creature that was just being naturally aligned, seeking its way, was knocked down. A few years later now, the devastation along all those riverbanks on the East Coast now are starting to see the lands, the rivers all going down into the ocean. It's becoming like a sewer, sediment everywhere. And I looked at that snail, and it reminded me of the dieback that's happening on multiple levels in the forest, within nature, within the soil. And so we have to become weavers again, and we remember the snail. And there are many other things. That's why when you ask the question, was I not craving human contact? Was I craving rather? It was because I was able to see the messages of these other sentient beings. I not only walked in the high grounds amongst the beauty of nature, where it's beautiful, pristine, and everyone goes, wow, beauty. I like to walk where the beast walks. So I walk along the roads, walking man, people speeding past, trucks beeping at me saying, get off the side of the road. I would point with my stick, slow down, truck. Next time you come across, I will smash your rear tail light. You got to warn big trucks, otherwise they start to take over the road. And that's a metaphor that sometimes, forgive me, that hurt a lot when I saw the laceration of the land, what I call the bitumen serpent, seeing all the snails and all the bees and all the other creatures on the side of the road. It's like a cemetery for the creatures. And so that was the truth. Unpleasant. I could have stayed in the high ground, talked to beautiful people, but it's bringing it back down, Mandy. As we both know, we have to bring a lot of this stuff down into the dark places and walk it so that you become a walking presence. You mightn't heal everything, but at least you're showing that there's a difference. It doesn't need to be all decay and die back in order for us to live as human beings, human
Yeah.
species.
Yeah, totally get that. And hitting on a sort of just a little bit of a different note, what do you feel is happening with the 1080 that's being spread through? Do you see that being a positive or a negatives in a sense? I know that's a quite a deep question because, you know, I've seen the devastation of these animals and nature itself that's been exposed to it and what we're seeing, but is it actually achieving what they thought it would? Do you know?
I remember once saying to someone, you asked me this question, was that some sort of environmental? And they said 1080 is perfect. I said, all right, let's test it. Let's go and get a couple of glasses and let's put 1080 in it and let's drink it. If you're saying it's yeah, I said, let's prove it. Never took up the offer. I was
No.
willing. And then when I found there was a particular lake called Lake Tutira in the Hawke's Bay, I went there one time and I could remember seeing this blue type toxin. It might have been 1080 or something. And I saw this black swan looking at it. And I actually took a bottle of it and I walked up New Zealand with that bottle and I put it in a Kiwi Blue. Because Kiwi Blue water is owned by Amatil New Zealand, which is a subsidiary of Coca-Cola. I said, okay,
Yeah.
black water man. And then ironically, John Campbell did an interview on my water in it, and he goes, and I said, I tasted it. I tasted the water. He goes, what does it? I said, it tastes like a cow shit smoothie, John. And you sort of saw the humor, but I said, I would prefer me to take the water and taste the bullshit and the shit in it rather than give it for the next generation of children or new species that are come onto the planet, still with the innocence of creation and having to go through such polluted waters, devastated land. And
Yeah.
that's where my answer is to your question. I don't believe it's a fast way out of a long-term problem. It needs a behavioral change. It needs a spiritual change. In fact,
Yeah.
soldiers, instead of going bombing and dropping bombs and everything, we could actually come back and send all your platoons and deployment up into the forests and all that to be able to keep the balance of one's pests, both animal and human.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's it's a sad thing. We went to go into Lake Roto Punamu and
Yep.
down underneath Ruapehu down there, and a friend and I, we were walking in. We were meeting other people at the lake, and we got so far into the bush up the track, and I just stopped, man. It was like everything just there was just this wall, and I could not move past it. And I went, and she said, "What?" My friend said, "What?" And I said, "Contamination." I said, "I'm not going any further. It's contaminated." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm out." So I turned around, we walked back. She was fast behind me. And we stayed in Taupo that night in a motel. And that night I was scrolling the notice board in Taupo's notice board on community page on
Yes.
Facebook. And there was a notification in there saying that they'd just dropped 1080 in that, absolutely at that lake. And she said to me, my friend said, "Oh my God, you just felt that so," and it was strong. And then the people that we were meeting there, we'd never got to cross paths, but they went in, they were swimming in the water and everything. They'd gone in, and I was thinking about that later on and thinking, how many times have we all been into the bush and, you know, maybe not someone like ourselves who might know because I picked that up, but
Yeah.
people who are unaware and they go in there and they're actually being poisoned so much. Like we are always somewhere in this land, somewhere in our environment is poison. And it's happening more and more. But I know for the 1080, I just felt so sad about that. I was like, why do they even think this is going to be a good thing? was just outrageous to me. But what it is, eh?
Oh, I agree with you. And this is part of our generation, is that we must become pathfinders. We
Mm,
must walk with a sense of awakened awareness so that don't be dependent on an outcome. Don't be dependent upon group agreement. You know, probably people think Hirini is a big arsehole. You know, probably they don't like me for certain reasons. I can't allow myself to stop being authentic just because something doesn't like me.
no.
And as you mentioned, sometimes we have to be rebellious, but also there's a fine time when to be compliant, but
Mm,
don't be compliant such that you put your head down and you think you've actually surrendered
that's
your
right.
morals, your values. You
Yes.
must keep striving to find a way, finding a way, even if it's one. This is why the walking is important.
Mm,
It's a metaphor for movement. Your intention sets the direction. I intend to walk over there, Hirini. Okay, my walk is the action. Each step. And for those who listen, I would count my steps. Now, I didn't have one of these flash digital counting things.
that is.
I would just count mentally and use my hands, count for every 25. And those who are mathematical, I'm a bit of an engineer. I work out things, metrics. Every 24 steps is about 20 meters for me, and you have to walk your own. And so I would just count 24, 25, one finger, 20 meters, 40, 60, 80, 100. And I would use those as my metrics, and that allowed me so that 10 fists is 1 kilometer. If I'm walking up a steep hill, I don't look at the top. I just look at the ground in front of me and let my hands become part of my walking.
Yeah.
I used flax korari as my walking pose because I'm reminded of a horse. When a horse goes up a hill, it has those two front legs. So that's another thing too with walking. Some people will say, I don't need to walk. I'm strong enough. I said, yeah, but be efficient and use
Mm,
pose. Again, I would use the korari, the flex poles, and
yeah.
I would make them tight. And then, I would do training. I would use them to tap my body, all these
Yeah.
things. And also they were light, and also they were replenishable. So when I got to the end of the North Island, the ones that I started with were worn out. So I replaced them and gave thanks and took another set.
Right.
Those were the things that I used rather than buying
Yeah. Yeah. Ski poles
there's
or
certain
something. Yeah.
manufactured poles, but they
Yeah.
were just things I could use. And so counting your steps, roughly I would do perhaps 20 kilometers, maybe a day, less or more. And I would count my steps. And then in 100 days, that's about 2,000. They say the Te Araroa is 3,000. Yeah, okay. Part of me is practical. You can
Yeah.
walk along a ridge line that takes an extra 10 kilometers, or I can walk along the dust dirt road at the bottom of it and still reach the end of the ridge. I'm a practical man, like you probably grew up on a farm. You know where the tracks are. It's like wild pigs or deers in the bush. They don't go
Mm,
over the ridge when there's a short track going up the gully.
yeah.
So
That's right.
that's where you got practical intelligence from the creatures. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry, those people who are really sort of purist walkers, and yeah, I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's all good. But yeah, definitely that. So do you have any sort of, other plans to do any more walking like that, Hirini, or do you think your days are done in doing that?
You've got to make a walk a part of your own way of recreating yourself.
Mm,
Walk out the old story, walk in the new story for this time.
mm,
It may be an indicator when you've reached a certain age, and I'm in my 60th year now, so I need to become more wiser and allow my youthful self, who was probably a lot stronger, less wiser, less considerate,
yeah.
and to move into a new way of being, of mentoring and allowing people to find their own walk of a hoe. And this is what without putting a plug, what I'm trying to do with my thesis is to look at the metaphor of walking as both a spiritual footprint as well as a physical stride, and to walk with a path, with a heart, a soul force that also has many roles, and you would understand being a mother, being a whole range of roles, but we have the soul that is robed in the role that we are doing.
Mm.
And we must find that particular calling in our life, that we must use our embodiment. My face, my body, this life is of this life. When I pass on, that is where the next mystery comes from. And that's where I feel a lot of people now are wondering, what is this life about? What is this life about? How can I live with the soul and still have a new role now? And so that's where part of my work. And to give an example, I just had a young boy from Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, 26 years old. And actually, I use him as an example. He just connected with me a day ago after about 2 or 3 years. Quite a strong young man, NFL, American football, that type of young man. When he came to New Zealand about 4 years ago, I had taken him and a group of others up a mountain in Coromandel, and he said he felt really inspired by how I taught him to use the mountain as a metaphor. And I'd given him a stone because he was so strong. I said, carry this rock. He said, what for? As a symbol of caring for somebody else, and take it up to the mountain. And so he was so strong, he was able to carry this rock up the mountain. And he was looking up, said, don't bother about what people think. And they started to think, wow, this man's carrying a sacred rock. And so he connected back with me because he said, Hirini, I lost my way in the 3 years. I've been on drugs and other things. I said, friend, this is the time for you to complete the journey again and continue to climb the mountain. And so he said something to me which really struck my heart. He said he's now going to be a professional firefighter. And I said, wow. He said he wants to protect property and people. He said, I was thinking of joining the military here because I know that was part of your background. He said, but what I'm finding now, soldiers are now killing for orders that necessarily can cause war crimes and genocide. And he said, I don't want to be that. I don't want to come back to the United States and feeling I've actually done something not right. Yeah. And then he mentioned the police. He wanted to join the police, but he said some of the police laws are enforcing things that really are not lawful, but they're just legal because somebody in Senate or Congress have put it. Yeah. Then he said, I want to be a first responder. I want to be someone who can protect, and he said firefighting. And then he wanted to use the fire. I said, use the fire as a metaphor, as a profession, but also how to nurture the fire within your being. Be a nourishing fire that can clear as well as relight a new beginning. Use that so that you're professionally, but you also have a spiritual meaning that fits your heart. Someone else has to do their own thing. And this is what quite inspired me about him, that he was able to look at a form of warriorship that wasn't about the militancy and all that. It was finding a way to help and be strong. So that is one example of how I'm doing. So I'm helping him to complete some things, including a Maori tattoo that he had incompleted. And I said, use your tattoo to be part of your new journey. Also use it to become a memorial of your ancestors, because he has certain ancestors as well. So this is one way that I'm seeking to use the walk in a way that people can bring it into their own lives and walk it.
Yeah, beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I know this is a little bit of it might be a whole nother podcast maybe at some point, but what's your take on where you feel Māori are now in New Zealand? Like, there's such a physicality to it now, if you get what I mean. Like, I feel like there's so much of it's lost the spiritual pathway in the bigger picture of Māori. And I feel that there, without getting into the politics of it, it's like I see the younger ones coming in now who are looking at the elders and really wanting to shift them into the now, like now, not in way back there where we were all sort of stuck for quite a long time, I think. And I don't quite get how that's going to happen. I can see how it's happening individually, and there's sort of movements that are moving in and sort of shifting things a wee bit, but how do we bring that into a bigger scope in the sense of allowing this to change where our direction is here in New Zealand, Maori, I mean, because we're, I was told a long, long time ago from Spirit that Maori were going to lead the world into sovereignty. And I believe that through that hikoi down in Wellington and how the Kaumatua tent was allowed to stay, they did not remove them. The police didn't remove them. Police commissioner came in to talk to them to move, and Kaumatua said, "We're not going anywhere. We'll go when we go. You're not telling us to go. We're not going to take this tent down, and you tell us when to. We're going to do it when we're ready." Mallard came down and he was trying to get them to move as well. And Kaumatua said again, "We're not going anywhere, you know? And they stayed right to the very end until they moved their own selves out of there and they weren't removed. And so in that, I saw the power of their sovereignty because nobody wanted to put their hands on them, for one thing, and they were totally respected in their choice and decision to stay. It was like even government knew they could not touch these Māori elders. And that said huge things to me. And I thought, where do we slip this power? Where's it slipping? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Do you get me?
Yeah,
It's a big question though. I get that.
it's a big question. So I did my own thing with these elders. We had written a book about the history and all these things, but my own soul said, I will walk back these roads, these stockyards, these places where these men were from, not in this time, but where they were before they left to go overseas.
Yeah.
And so that was my way of making peace and trying to bring a sense of acknowledgement. We are having a transition time now, and so we're all part of this, both those for and against certain issues. We must find our own inner peace, and so we must do the inner walk and walk these issues, these points of ignition, so that they become points of activation rather than points of combustion or violence, such that it breaks down rather than to have a break free. We must have elements which give us hope, and we must count our individual steps on a daily basis so that we are still moving, even though I feel hopeless today. Hirini, I feel such a disheartenment. You talk to yourself, Hirini, this is a spiritual time now. Be aware of your fact that you don't feel good, but keep breathing and find that little space and keep feeling and talking to the great elements. Talk to the great sky. Tell them your thoughts. Talk to Manaya. Talk to the elements. And one day or tomorrow, they may be able to talk to the other human beings to remind them of the wonders of the great forces of nature that can coexist without having to suppress. And so, to your question, we got to find our own inner space that we can contribute to the outer world, even though if it's not done on a huge macro scale.
Yeah.
We can start being kind to ourselves, to our families, birthdays, remembrances, and just have a hopeful and allow. And why I'm saying this, because I'm remembering certain things which happened on the walk where young people mentioned things. They wrote me letters. Thank you for talking to us. I now know what I want to do in life. I want to walk from Kaitaia to someplace. And I was just laughing because the kid was so innocent. But those are the things that we can leave behind. A good
Yeah.
memory. A good memory. and a good intent. How we walk it out collectively. I didn't go on the hiko as such because I don't really like walking in large masses. Yet people still recognize there is a value in Hirini's opinion because he can sometimes sense things that we don't sense when we're walking in a large mass. And same with you and others listening. So we've got to find a way to weave the night, the ruru, the owl, into the songbird of the day so that they two can coexist. If that makes any sense, it's just inward seeking and outward, and hopefully there's little sanctuaries and little shoots of hope and positivity coming through. A new ngahere is being grown, like a new Garden of Eden. I'm not being Christian or that type of thing, but just saying small little shoots of hope will appear, even though there's still concrete and resistance.
And agree, I agree. It's sometimes it's you know, because it is an inward journey, and it is that inward journey that's going to shift the outer exterior here, and that's you know, when I think about that and I see how it's progressing, I see that it's actually, you know, I think, oh, this is going to take a long time. It's going to be years, and I'm hoping it's all going to shift before my granddaughter, who's only 5 now, is an adult, you know, and I'm hoping that that's what will happen. But in the presence of now, where I'm seeing this shift so quickly, like it's actually moving really, really quickly, and the awarenesses and the awakening that people are having, and our own journey of awakening has hit this moment of absolute catapult now, you know. And so I have real faith, and I know that just by doing and keep doing what we're doing and keep bringing that awareness to others around coming to their own inner journey is how we're going to get there. And it already is showing me that. I get it. But, you know, when I look into the politics, which I don't go into, obviously, I really don't. But when the hikoi for the treaty was happening and all of that, it's like there's even in, you know, there's the Pākehā and the Maori thing going on, you know, so we got all that happening. And then there's also the breakup between Maori, you know, and all different aspects of that. So there's a real shifting and shuffling and sifting out of a lot of things that are happening in in the external and in the physicality of our life here on the planet and as a people. And it has to happen that way. It's just got to continually keep doing. And the more that we can bring in that higher perspective and remind people of their own wairua, their spirit, and really keep connecting them into that space and the elements, and that's the only way we're going to get there. And like I say, it's already happening. I get that, but I just sort of sometimes I think, oh my goodness, I wish this had just shift today and everyone would get it and the government wouldn't be doing what they're doing and it won't be showing up the way it's showing up. But that also is part of our learning. It's really part of our learning. And like seed, you know, when you were talking before about the seed coming through your green, the green journey, in that respect, you know, there was darkness first and then there was light. You know, and like the seed in the ground, it's in the darkness and it seeks the light. So it's that journey. We're all on that journey. And every single aspect of our humanness is coming into that space of looking more into the light of our life rather than the dark of it. So yeah, it's shifting. So Hirini, what you know, if there's a final message you might have for humanity and anyone who's listening or watching this, what would that be? Do you feel?
Continue to keep walking within the embodiment of this life of where you are right now. Just press pause, breathe, and count to 10 so that you become aware. That was one of my tricks for walking. When shit happened, I'd taken the wrong path, I would just say, Hirini, stop, count to 10, breathe out, and so you can get clarity on your response. Otherwise, you're just going to be effing being, and you lose a lot of energy in that moment before you clear thinking. Also, secondly, walk with a feeling sometimes and just sit with a feeling where you allow yourself to have a miracle unfold. Start to become a believer in the miracle such that it may unfold. Mentally, I can't work everything out, but then I just hold a special memory, a special thought, a special feeling that I'm still here. I have a role to play. I might not know everything, but just get through this day and try not to think all about the problems, because today will end and another day will begin tomorrow. And hopefully I'm able to sort of be aware of yesterday, today, and what tomorrow may bring. And that's what I'm hoping, is that as part of this spiritual philosophy like martial arts, you find a way to protect yourself, but it's not aggression. It's just holding the sanctity of who you are so that you can continue to hold it together and allow it to flower into something, whatever that is. So that is my feeling for this. We are the dream of the elders, and tomorrow will be the dream of us today. I may not be awake to see what the dream has fulfilled, but at least I can begin with my life and to share something. And that was one of the key lessons of my walk, was seeing my footprints getting swept away by the wind along Te Onaroa Tohe, 90 Mile Beach, and just reflecting to myself, I'm not here long, Mandy. Soon my footprints will get cleared away, but there will be a wind that carries the memories of all of us as it moves through. And so that's what I just would like to acknowledge and affirm for those ones listening. Keep that little footprint of faith walking within you. You'll be surprised how much distance it can cover.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. It's really beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Hirini, for coming in and having this chat. And I really admire your walk, like actually, and I think you're just such a beautiful pillar of light that's been really anchoring that into this land. And yeah, thank you for all you're doing and all you are. So
All right,
beautiful.
then, Mandy, thank you. And to all your listeners and all that, you're all walkers within your own life. Allow your journey to be of memory and leave something behind for others to be inspired by. Doesn't need to be much. Just know that someone's walked their own life. Bless
Yeah,
you. All right.
beautiful.
Thank
Much love.
you. All right.